As an avid stealth gamer, I'm embarrassed to admit I have not played through the Assassin's Creed series. I had not played a single game prior to starting this project. And that said, I was always interested in them. Even though Ubisoft is well known for generic, soulless, annual releases of near-identical games, they're still usually fun, even if they aren't great. And honestly, fun stealth games are fairly rare, so I was excited to start working my way through this series. However, I was not prepared for the jumbled, chaotic mess that was Assassin's Creed 1. I am blown away that this game somehow got a sequel. It did not deserve a sequel. That said, I'm very grateful because I know the series evolves into something much better. I just don't know how it ever got there. This work of fiction was designed, developed, and produced by a multicultural team of various religious faiths and beliefs. This is the opening statement of the game, and I'll be honest, it was slightly alarming. But not because I'm irrationally terrified of diversity and inclusion as an unfortunate number of gamers are, but rather because I felt that was the warning signs of a game that would try to be provocative and insightful, and I highly suspected it would spectacularly fail and be an incredibly shallow experience instead.
Tell me, what's your part in all of this? Do you intend to defend yourself as the others have and explain away your evil deeds?
The Brotherhood wanted the city. I wanted power. There was an opportunity.
And I was right. But I'll get to that. Instead, the game was set up in the middle of the Third Crusade, a very peaceful time in history. Most people you meet are assholes, which probably prompted a lot of the initial warning text. Hey, we aren't shitting on any particular belief set, they all equally suck. And the game kind of ends on a slightly nihilistic note, and essentially refers to all religion as a scam, or an illusion, I guess.
Red Sea was never parted. Water never turned to wine. It was not the machinations of Iris that spawned the Trojan War, but this! Illusions! All of them! They live amongst an illusion already. I'm simply giving them another. One that demands less blood.
So I kind of understand the initial defensiveness. But whatever. Video games have always been political, and religion is nothing but a fine-tuned weapon of politics, so why should religion be off limits in video games? The gameplay itself was lacking, and this is probably the most disappointing to me. The game tried to be a combination of an action game, a parkour platformer, and also a stealth game, and the game failed amazingly on all three accounts. The platforming was horrendous. The hit detection is just outright bad. The random overcorrections of your jumps often led me to launch myself randomly to my painful death below, instead of simply jumping forward and grabbing onto the obvious ledge in front of me. I could have at least tolerated it if I was surviving my jumps, or at least going in the right direction, but the game seemed intent on having me throw myself off rooftops rather than escaping the ancient day equivalent of police officers.
It's forbidden for you to be here.
What the fuck, game? Why would you possibly think that I wanted to do that?
Odd. Why would he do that?
Maybe, honestly, the game was trying to give me some not-so-subtle message, and they might have been onto something, because this game was painful to experience. Speaking of the police, at least they were pretty accurate on that front. Just like real life, these guards seem excessively hungry for blood. If you are caught running in an apparently no-running zone, they will decide it's time to call every soldier within 20 miles and hunt you down and slaughter you. I initially tried to fight them off, but found it was just a tedious waste of time. It was much better to just keep running and hope you find a convenient hiding spot on your way to your next objective. The platforming wasn't fast either. You'd think having a game built around vaulting rooftops and leaping away from police, it would at least feel speedy and intentional, but the game was generally very slow. I found myself running longer routes simply to avoid having to slowly pull myself up from ledges, and I found myself vaulting walls instead of using the convenient ladder right next to me simply because it saved a little bit of time. Climbing the towers was consistently a chore that I avoided for as long as possible. They fill out your map, so it's kind of necessary, but doing so was always out of the way and just a constant waste of time, and I didn't feel like the payoff was worth it for such slow animations.
I'll have your head!
Perhaps, though I'm not being that fair. As I have ADHD, I've never been particularly patient as a gamer, and this game is quite old at this point. But most other platformers of this time period still had better movement and a focus on speed. For instance, it was only 1 year later that Mirror's Edge came out, a game I think really set the standard for parkour games. Regardless, I was disappointed in the clunkiness of this game and the controls. It made exploration a chore rather than fun, and games should be fun. And now that I mention it, the combat was pretty tedious too. You just sat in the middle of a circle of enemies and waited for them to swing, one at a time, so you can counter. If you wanted to try to get some hits in while you were waiting for the next attack, you can grab onto somebody or try attacking and breaking their shield, but ultimately, it wasn't really worth it. I found it much easier and faster to just run. Fair enough though, this was supposed to be a stealth game, right? Not a fighting game. Well, apparently wrong. There isn't really much stealth in this game, at least not in the conventional way. I'm sure the enemies had an invisible vision cone that you could only be caught in if you were seen by them, but there isn't really any hiding behind cover or even any stealth kills. The game seems to borrow some ideas from Agent 47, but couldn't keep any of the systems in place in the Hitman series to allow for that type of hiding in plain sight. You basically just pray to be inconspicuous, and then stab them in the back and run. Inevitably, someone will call the guards, and they'll accuse the only guy who looks kind of like he enjoys stabbing people, and they will chase you down for forever. It works, sometimes, but it often feels as shallow as the game's politics. Stealth kills aren't really a thing. Of your 9-ish targets, I was only able to stealthily assassinate one of them, and even then the guards were immediately alerted to my position, and the entire city was suddenly on high alert, with bells ringing and the gates closed. Essentially, this game is not a stealth game. It's an action platformer, but with really poor action and really poor platforming, and they hide this behind the claims of stealth. You know, with the gameplay out of the way, what about the story? Well, the story is actually something I liked, or at least I liked the potential. They didn't really do much but establish a world, but it's a world that I'm eager to explore and one I assume they build off of in the sequels. As far as the game's plot, you are an assassin, but not really though. You don't really believe in assassins, yet seem oddly invested in them and their cause. You are kidnapped by the bad guys who aren't really bad, but definitely are, and they are searching for a lost relic which can do something. Probably bad stuff, unless you buy into the game's hints of bad doesn't really exist and everything is subjective. They are quick to point out that you aren't actually traveling through time, you are simply living through the past ancestors' memories, and only have so much leeway before it desynchronizes.
What is a memory, Mr. Miles?
It's the recollection of a past event.
What if I told you that the human body not only housed an individual's memory, but the memories of his ancestors as well? Genetic memory, if you will. Migration, hibernation, reproduction. How do animals know when and where to go? What to do?
The bad guys have some cool science, and they spend an awful lot of time establishing a more grounded universe for this type of non-time travel to exist, so it was especially bizarre when things got really supernatural. That said, I don't really mind, it just seems weird to blend science fiction and magic at the same time. If you consider this first game establishing a long-running plot that will continue on, not much actually happens in the game. You are kidnapped, you locate a map that tells evil Jeff Bezos where to find the magic, and then you expect to be killed, unless you escape, which will undoubtedly happen in the sequel. The story's a little more deep if you consider the story within the Animus, and therein lies the weird politics of the writers. You have to redeem your honor by killing off several named evil dudes. You play through the mini-games to unlock their locations, and then you hunt them down and stab them in the throat. Inevitably, you have to listen to 5 minutes of unskippable dialogue and an obligatory murder so you don't feel bad for assassinating the target. And then you kill them. Kind of. Except after you stab them in the throat, they then talk to you for another 5 minutes of unskippable dialogue. This is really impressive for somebody who just had their throat ripped out, but the novelty kind of wears off after 9 kills. Most of these villains claim they aren't actually villains. They were actually enslaving, maiming, torturing, and murdering innocent people because they wanted to help said murdered people. Altair inevitably questions his own morals after these encounters before his master verbally slaps him in the face. Do you think they were good for murdering people? No? Then shut the fuck up and keep murdering the people I tell you to. So it's no surprise when your master betrays you, and he uses magic in an anticlimactic boss fight, and dies. You find his map for other magical god items, and scene. I don't know what the questioning was supposed to lead to. Everyone's a villain? Everyone's a hero? Morality doesn't exist? Who knows? It fell flat, much like the rest of the game. Ultimately, I don't regret playing Assassin's Creed. I like seeing the origins of a series that became so well loved, but it's difficult to see how people accepted a sequel, or why any more of the game ever existed. Somehow, Ubisoft decided that it was worth the investment, which means the first game must have made some money, right? Which means some people must have liked this game, somehow. Regardless, I'm hoping Assassin's Creed 2 shows a more substantial increase in quality, much like playing The Witcher 2.